This is Angie from Life Begins Today. I had on some earplugs and I'm about to take them off. All right, so we are about to get started with our book club discussion. But first, I want to thank you all for tuning in, whether you come into the live now or you see this at a later date. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, as I said in my post earlier today, I've been offline and really not doing a lot. Man, it's been about a year. And so I decided to be more intentional about my online presence and be more consistent with it. And so each Monday, we will have a live stream book discussion. Today, we're going to be talking about the Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride, prolific author, New York Times best-selling author, and we're gonna just kind of delve into it. Um, I hope that you will give me some feedback about this book. Let me know what you thought of it. You'll see in the description that I'll post with the live that the book is available everywhere. Now, I purchased mine on Amazon just because I didn't really want to go to the store, and it was able to be delivered like literally in a day when I ordered mine. And so I've been reading this book and I just love it. So I'm going to read what's on the back page and tell you a little bit about it. In 1972, when workers in Pottstown, Pennsylvania were digging the foundations for a new housing development, the last thing they expected to uncover was a human skeleton. Who the skeleton was and how it got buried there were just two of the long held secrets that had been kept for decades by the residents of Chicken Hill, the dilapidated neighborhood where immigrant Jews and African Americans lived side by side, sharing ambitions and sorrows. Chicken Hill was where Moshe and Shona Ludlow lived when Shona ran the Heaven and Earth grocery store, which served the neighborhood's quirky collection of blacks and European immigrants, helped by her husband Moshe, a Romanian born theater owner who integrated the town's first dance hall. When the state came looking for a deaf black child, claiming that the boy needed to be institutionalized, Chicken Hill's residents, roused by Shona's kindness and the courage of a local black worker named Nate Timblin, banded together to keep the boy safe. As the novel unfolds, it becomes clear how much the people of Chicken Hill have to struggle to survive at the margins of white Christian America, and how damaging bigotry, hypocrisy, and deceit can be to a neighborhood. When the truth is revealed about the skeleton, the boy, and the part the town's establishment played in both, McBride shows that it is love and community, heaven and earth, that ultimately sustain us. That is a synopsis of this book. And again, it was written by James McBride, who also is the author of Deacon King Kong and The Good Lord Bird. Now, how many of you have actually had a chance to read this? This book came out in 2023, so it isn't completely new. Yes, 2023. It's a Penguin Random House publication. And so I just found out about it actually, maybe about 2 or 3 months ago. I just learned of this book. And it took me about another month to actually decide to go ahead and order it. And I am so glad I did. I'm sorry it took all of this time. I'm kind of almost at the end, and I'm not going to go all the way to the end of the book because we're going to discuss it again next Monday. So we'll complete the discussion then. But the Heaven and Earth bookstore, I'm sorry, the Heaven and the Earth grocery store is one of those stories that shows humanity, right? And so let me ask those of you who will see this what you think the theme is. Now, what I just read you is enough for you to figure out what a theme is. There are several themes that run through the book, but I guess what the message is, the injustice of being different. It talks about disabilities, handicaps. Although we try not to use that word in a politically correct world, handicap is no longer the correct terminology to use. So it deals with disabilities and it just what constitutes a real community and what real community and real community love look like. And so as I read it, Chicken Hill is a neighborhood, is a community where immigrants from Europe, including Russia, um, Jews. These weren't just immigrants from all over Europe. These are Jews who had immigrated from Europe and who came to the Pittsburgh area, Pottstown. I don't know if there is a real Pottstown or not, but came to Pittsburgh area. And so even though there's a discovery in 1972, the book goes back to the 1920s and 30s when Moshe and Shona Ludlow, the two main characters in the book, were very, very young and where they first met. And it goes through really the trajectory of Shona's life because she was born and raised in Chicken Hill and never wanted to leave. When all of the other Jewish people moved out, she wanted to stay. And so I think about 2024 and the relationship between Jews and Black people in America. What was it like in the 70s? What was it like in the 30s? Well, this kind of gives you an idea what it was like in Pennsylvania in the 30s. But do you see any kind of relationship between Blacks and Jews today? What does it mean to live in a world where there is real injustice by being different? As a Black person living in America in today's time, we don't really consider the fact that Jewish people are considered different. We consider them to be white people, right? With all of the rights and benefits and privileges and whatever comes along with being white in America. But Jewish people were immigrants to the U.S. initially, and they had to learn how to fit in. One of the characters in the book is Malachi, and he says that he thinks Black people actually have an advantage because at least we know who we are, where we fit in the grand scheme of things in the U.S. By the Jews being immigrants, most of them at that time, first generation, just straight off the boat, so to speak, they didn't fit in. They were escaping suppression and oppression in Europe. This was the time of Nazi Germany, and so many of them had relatives that had lost their lives or were going to lose their lives in the concentration camps. and they wanted a better way of life. And they came to the U.S., but they were victimized. And but I guess the question is, from the 30s, because let me go back and see where this started. I think it will tell me that this began, let's see, with page 23. Let's see. Page 23. A bad sign. So 47 years before 72. So that was in the 20s, right? Because 72 minus 50 is what? 22, 23, 24, 25, 1925. So the book actually kind of goes back to 1925 and even a little bit before that, because in 1925, these people were adults, young adults in their 20s. So it goes back before that. So from the early 1900s till now, we can see the shift in the relations, first of all, in how Jews are treated in the U.S., and then the relationship between Jews and Black people in America. Um, and it's something to think about in light of what's happening in Israel right now. So maybe in our next discussion, we'll delve a little bit more into that. What I want to know is, what do you think are the injustices that they faced that Black people face as well? Are they the same? Are they different? Um, did their injustices as being Jewish immigrants to a new world have a harder, or have a harsher, or an easier, a lesser impact on the collective lives of Jews in the U.S. compared to the reality and the impact of being Black in America? What do you think? And those people that were, racist, because that's what it was, were racist to Blacks in the 1920s and the 1930s, heck, in 2024. And those people who were racist to Jews because they were different, because they spoke a different language, because they had different mannerisms. How can you reconcile that? And how can you see the humanity in those types of people? So that's a conversation, that's a question that we can ask now as then. How can we see past the hatred and the racism? And James McBride, the author, said it best in an interview. He said that you have to have a desire to see the good in people and to see them push past their boundaries. Think about that. You have to have a desire to see the good in people. So the question becomes, do we have the desire to see the good in people? People who mistreat us, people who subjugate us for whatever reason, because of a disability, because of race, because of gender, because of economic status, because of where we live, whatever. Can we see any good in them? And considering what happened on November 5th, can we see the good in that? You have to have a desire, and I totally agree, to see the good in others and see them pushing past their boundaries into something better. This is part of what this book tells us. And reading the full novel you get into the nooks and crannies. There are so many characters. Like there's one character who's the doctor in Pottstown, and there's only one doctor in Pottstown, and he is a racist. Everybody knows that he is part of the Ku Klux Klan, even though they parade around in their hoods, people know who he is. They know what he looks like. They know his body type. They know it's him, and they know how he treats them. And nobody likes him. None of the black people, none of the Jewish people on the hill like him. But when you need a doctor, he's the closest one to call. And there is Malachi, another immigrant who came when he had nothing, fresh off the boat, and he loved to dance. He loved to dance. He came one night for a concert and went away. And 20 years later, he shows back up as an older man who has lived some things and done some things, but he's still not settled. There is Nate Timblin, who works with Moshe in his theater, and his wife, Addie, who works with Shona in the grocery store. And when Shona becomes almost terminally ill, so ill that they thought she was going to die, everybody except her husband, it was Addie that sat by her side. And how often do black women do that? We take care of everyone, but who takes care of us? That's another theme. That's another um, kind of outline that we can pin and use it for further discussion. Then there is the little deaf boy, Dodo is what they call him, because he can neither hear nor speak. And so, back in the day, they used to call them deaf and dumb. And but these people who are his family, because his mother died, and I think his mother was Addie's sister. So when she died, Addie and her husband took him in, but he was supposed to be in the what they call the home for handicapped children, but really it was a mental institution where they wanted to scrounge up and put all of the undesirable children, all of the black children that had any inkling of a problem, and all of the poor whites. And so the community hid him. Shona hid him and took him in her home. Would we do that today? Well, today I guess it would be there are laws in place to safeguard people. But back in the day, probably up until the 70s, it wasn't unusual for people to be institutionalized against their will, even when they had some say so over their lives. They had the ability to speak for themselves, but they weren't allowed to if they had a disability. And people were just kind of put in these institutions, and the doors were locked, and they were forgotten about, and they were mistreated. I have read over the years uh, accounts of just horrific treatment in these types of institutions. Not everyone is bad, but so many of them were, and the people that worked in them were just cruel, inhumane people that shouldn't have been sweeping streets, much less been given the responsibility to take care of another human being. That is another thread that runs throughout this book. Um, what is another thread? Having a small business in a small community, and how the business and the community relate to one another. So how the business owner treats his customers, and how the customers maintain loyalty to the business. That's a symbiotic relationship. And I think about today, We don't have that anymore. We have plenty of small businesses, but people aren't loyal necessarily to them, and the business owners aren't aren't loyal to the people, in that they don't take care of the people. Everybody's trying to get as much money as they can, and they don't care what it costs their customers. They don't necessarily give good customer service. The product is kind of iffy, but they still expect the customers to pay full price. And so at the same time, you have some businesses that are good businesses, but because of where they're located, they're not given the loyalty or the respect that they should be given. They could be right down the street, but someone will drive 5, 10 miles out of the way because they think that that is further away will be better than the businesses just down the street or around the corner. When did that change in our communities? Um, what is another thread in this book? Well, there's so many. How women are perceived. There's a difference between Jewish religion and the Christian religion, because most of the black people who, were religious were Christian, and of course you have the Jews, and how did that play in their social relationships? Well, first of all, did they have social relationships, or did they have relationships just because they were neighborly but they weren't social? There is something. There is a woman in the book who lives next door to the grocery store, and Shona, before she becomes ill, makes a point of saying that she hasn't talked to that person in years. They grew up together. They were friends together. They played together as girls. But then they had a falling out in high school and stopped speaking. And now they're in their 40s, 50s, and um, she lives literally next door, and they don't really speak. Um, and that woman has 8 or 11 children. Chona never had any children. That's another thread. What happens when you are childless though you wanted a child? Or how are single mothers treated? Um, how are single women treated in comparison to women who have the quote unquote protection of a husband? There is so much in this book. And because Moshe owned a dance hall, not one, but a theater and a dance hall, there's a lot of entertainment. So interspersed throughout the book, you'll hear or you'll read about Count Basie Orchestra coming, and Lionel Hampton coming, and other persons who were really big, from the 30s on up to the 70s. And it's really interesting to see how, like in Harlem, for instance, we've all seen movies and on television shows depicting Harlem, and you see white folks who would go to Harlem just for the entertainment, but they wouldn't be seen in Harlem any other time. And that would be the only time that, blacks and whites of a certain area would be able to come together over entertainment. And so you see some of that in the book. Um, that is another thread that is in this book. There's so many things to take away from this novel, and I encourage you to get the book if you don't already have it. Read it and be prepared to talk about it um, next week. And so we will finish up next week and then talk about what we're going to do for the following week, which book we're going to read next. Thank you so much. And I ask that you subscribe to this channel. give this video a a thumbs up for me. I'm trying to do something different and something new, and it's going to take a while for me to get the kinks out and for me to really, get my groove and figure out exactly what I'm doing. But one of the reasons that I'm here is because I think it is important, and I believe that others think it's important too, for women of a certain age uh, to come together and to find community. There are so many people on social media, whether it's YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, X, TikTok, whatever. And there's so many podcasts that, are not even on these platforms. There are other podcast platforms. But despite there being so many, there are still areas where other people can fit in, where there's information lacking, where there is a community that still needs to be created for someone. And I'd like to think that there is a community that we can create through this channel and this content. So I will be back. Look for some additional posts throughout the week related to the Heaven and Earth grocery store, but also related to other topics um, that I'd like to talk about. And I'd like to hear what you want to talk about. Um, so, yeah, please consider subscribing and asking friends to come along um, and like my page, or I should say, like my channel. See, I don't even have the right terminology yet, but like my channel. And as I move forward, I'm going to get better and do some other things. Oh, one of the things that we are definitely going to talk about is life outside the U.S. For those of you who see this and know me, you know that I've lived outside of the U.S. and I am planning to um, move again, hopefully very soon. I'm just kind of trying to put things in place so that I can at least go and visit, some kind of reconnaissance mission, if you will, um, after the holidays to see where I'm going to go and if that place is something I'm going to like for a more permanent residence. So we'll talk about that. And I'd like to hear your ideas about life after a certain age, about life perhaps outside of the US. If you've ever thought about moving, um, let's talk about it. If you have a passion that you want to take to another level, you want to move it from a hobby state to a higher state that maybe takes more of your time, that where you're more consistent and where you can monetize it in a beneficial way. Let's talk about that. Anything else that you want to talk about? If you want to learn something new, I am embarking on Spanish classes because I want to go to a country um, where Spanish is the first language. So I need to brush up on my Spanish. Anyway, thank you so much. It is 8:35. I kind of wanted to be here for half an hour, so I'm 5 minutes over. I appreciate your time and I thank you so much. And again, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Talk to you soon.